Welcome once again to the Sandro Forte Success Stream. Today, I am going to abandon the introduction, the normal introduction, for the simple reason that this man's CV is utterly incredible. It would take me about 15 minutes to read it to you. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story, and then you'll meet him in person. So several years ago, I was stood minding my own business in a Starbucks. I happened to be on my way home after a long day in London, and I was just about to pay for my usual black Americano, and the man in the queue behind me stepped forward and told the cashier that he would take care of my drink. Now, I'm the glass half full guy, but even I was a little bit skeptical, and I turned to this lovely man behind me and said, "That's very kind of you, but do you mind me asking why you are buying my Starbucks for me today?" And the answer that I received, I'm going to let him do this for you all, but it was a fairly pivotal moment in my life. It is something that I have since been able to emulate, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And we'll also dissect this magnificent CV. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce not just a very, very talented musical artist. I'll refer to him as an artist because that's what he is. But he is a musical conductor of many orchestras. We'll talk about those as well. But just a very nice man and somebody I'm very pleased to call a friend ever since that chance encounter in Starbucks. So please welcome to the Sandro Forte Success Stream today, Mr. Simon Chalk.
Sandro, it's so good to see you. I think one of those, that was thanks for the introduction. That's far too kind. The most important thing you said there is the friendship. That's for me is the key to how we make things move forwards. And how we met, yeah, that was one of my things, which began some years before I met you. 2012 was the first time that I did it. I happened to be in a queue in a Starbucks again, but this time I was in Seattle. I was playing at the Symphony Hall just down the road from this particular Starbucks. We had a break, so I came out, and there's a guy stands next to me in the queue, and he was that big that the lights kind of slightly went out. They went a bit dim because he was broad-shouldered, and he was in such a rush. But he said to me, I was packing my glasses away, very particular about my things, and he said, "I wish I was as careful with my things as you are with yours." And I said, "Well, my friend, why the rush? Why are you, He said, "Well, I'm a father of two, running around after these guys." He said, "I'm working two jobs to try and make ends meet, but I'm retraining to be a paramedic, and I have my university course comes up this evening, and I haven't done half the things I need to, and I've not had enough sleep, and etc., etc." So I said to the young lady behind the counter, I said, "Is there any chance well, what's the biggest thing that you have?" I said, "What are you having, my friend?" And he said, "Just like you, black Americano." And I said, "What's the largest black Americano you can do?" And in America, it looks like a bucket. It's like being at the cinema. It's that big. So he thanked me profusely for the coffee and went off to his study. And I kind of tripped back then to Symphony Hall for the rest of I think I performed that evening probably. And I felt really quite like I'd done somebody a really good and big favor. And so I just kept doing it. So it's a completely random thing, and it doesn't matter whether you are, you could be a gentleman, you could be a lady, you can be a child, you could be, whoever's next in the queue. And if it takes my fancy that day, and it'll be just off the bat that I will choose to buy that person their coffee. But I've since kind of morphed it a little, because what I want to do is I want that to continue on for the day for that person, maybe passing on to others. And I always say, before midnight, you have to do something decent for somebody else. You don't have to buy them anything, because maybe you don't, it's not something we can afford to do. Not everybody can afford to buy coffee for the person in the queue. Not everybody can afford to be in a Starbucks in the first place. So, it's just be kind. Don't shout at your children when you get home, or just be not. Don't kick the dog, or whatever it is that you do when you get home. Be nice, just in some way during the day. And what it's done is it's led on to me, meeting some absolutely fabulous people. There's no contract between us. As I said to you on that day, there was no contract between you and I. And yet we find ourselves here right now, more than 8 years later. Because it probably is about that long if we take the pandemic into consideration. But yeah, and so you can find you can find friends this way. Not that, you know, I don't think either of us are going to be short on friendship and on friends, but just having that somebody that is a random in your life, I think can be a really, really helpful thing, a helpful thing for sure.
Well, you've really inspired me, Simon, because when we had that
Mm.
conversation and you kind of gave me the condition, and the condition was that I had to pay that kindness, some kindness forward in 24 hours. I still buy random strangers cups of coffee, typically in Starbucks. That's where I tend to go. And it's amazing, as you rightly say, you know, and we're not here today to talk about philanthropy, but I think we are both philanthropic people. I think we realize that philanthropy isn't about necessarily giving lots of money. It's about noticing somebody, reaching out, you know, a kind gesture. And I think that was the one thing that really connected us. And as you say, interestingly, some of the great friendships, ours in particular, have been born of these chance encounters, but also the ability to pay that kindness forward. And that was the thing I always identified in you. So since I saw you last, lovely change of look. I'm really enjoying the beard, and
Yeah.
you are sitting clearly at home at the moment because you've got a lovely, probably probably fairly fairly expensive fiddle on the wall, and there's a snare drum skin, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, belongs to or was signed by Christa Berg, who everyone should know. But
Mm.
let's start with where it all began. So you were born in a small mining village in South Wales.
Yes.
For those of you around the world, Wales is a small province of the UK. A lovely part of the world. Actually, if you ever get the chance to come over to the UK, Wales is a must see.
Yeah.
I was only pulling your leg, Simon. So small mining
Fighting
village
talk that, you
in
know, fighting talk that is good Lord.
in South Wales, and then started playing the violin at the age of 11. And then, well, I mean, there's a lot of space to fill in between then and now. Let's do our best, because I will have to pick up the list of accolades and the various orchestras you've performed with. But they range from the St. Petersburg Symphony right the way through to goodness me, the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, all the way through to Slovakia. I mean, all over the place. So I'm probably doing a huge injustice. But you know, you grew up in a musical family. We might talk a little bit about nature and nurture, but just tell us about the formative years of Simon Chalk, soon to be MBE.
Oof, good Lord. Who knows? The musical family is a kind of, yeah, not like some. I mean, some people, my children grew up in a musical family because both my wife and I play. You know, dad's a conductor and a violinist, and mum was a flautist. So that's what I would consider to be very much a musical family. My grandmother had a pianola, and the last time I saw you, remember we were in that lovely studio in Soho, and there was an old Joanna behind us. So I tinkled a little bit just towards the very end. I'm not gonna do that today because the piano's 2 floors down. And so this pianola was fascinating because it was for those of you who don't know or have never come across a pianola was this machine that was invented to play itself. It's a piano that plays itself. It weighs an absolute ton, this thing. It's very heavy because it's got a mechanism inside that plays the piano. And you put a roll in it. So like if you pulled it all out, it'd be a very long sheet of paper, but it rolls up. You attach it onto this mechanism on the inside, and as it rolls, it allows air to be punched through a barrel, and then those air holes depress the keys on the piano and play the piano for itself. You manipulate it by 2 pedals, which you push, which spins everything around. And most of these rolls had to be played into another machine first, which was a piano that made the rolls. So a lot of these rolls are performances by the actual composers. So you got Percy Grainger playing his own music, Rachmaninoff playing his own music into these machines. So you could have almost, this was, you know, we're talking just before recorded music as well, or around about the same kind of period, that you could have these things at home and have Rachmaninoff playing in your living room. And so I was fascinated by this thing, but was not allowed in this front room for many years. And then only with my grandmother. So from the age of 3, my grandmother and I would go to this room, and she wrote on the keys C through C, and I would learn the notes based on what my grandmother said. So she would point to the notes on the page. And so one of my obsessions was with one tune in particular called "Feed the Birds," which is again, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's from Mary Poppins. Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence a bag. And that tune, I loved it. So I learned it. And my granny, as I said, she wrote these things on, and she accompanied me a little bit on the piano. So then from about the age of 6 or so, 5 or 6, I was allowed to go into the room by myself. So then I've got this entire piano to play with. And within this mechanism, there are various buttons and things you can push. It was a fascination, really. But because of my the lack of means within for my parents, having lessons was never going to happen. We had the piano, but there was no room for lessons. So when I got to senior school, having missed out the opportunity to play at junior school because I had tonsillitis in the 2 weeks that they dished the violins out, and I missed it. My younger brother got one, and he didn't like it at all, and I was furious that he got one and I didn't. So when I got to senior school, age 11, quite late to be picking up an orchestral instrument for sure. But I picked this fiddle up at age 11 on day 1 of being at high school, senior school. And within 3, 4, 5 weeks, I knew this was going to be something I was going to do for a long, long time. Whether it was going to be something I could do as a living, I wasn't really sure. And the rest has this has taken me, this thing here, it's taken me pretty much everywhere. It didn't take me as far as the stick did. The stick took me a lot further. But without learning this and without having that history of being in an orchestra, I mean, before I conducted orchestras, I've been playing in orchestras for more than 25 years. So you have to kind of, for me, it's a thing that you need to be involved in the thing as a foot soldier before perhaps stepping up to becoming a manager, and then the general manager as I am, because that's what I do as a conductor. My role is to manage sound. I don't make sound, I manage it. And I have the world's greatest mixing desk at my disposal. And one always has to remember that without the talent of those musicians, nothing I do makes any sense whatsoever. I'm just a guy waving his arms around.
I love. You must be the only orchestra conductor that's ever referred to it as a stick. Are you actually allowed to do that?
Well, I describe myself as a Valley's boy with a stick, because it is just a stick at the end of the day. And there are various ones that we can have. We have them made out of all sorts of things, and people have very, very fancy smancy ones that are made by what would they be? Magicians, I guess you'd call them. They're made by magicians in the States and in Japan and in France. But mine are pretty kind of straightforward. They do have a bit of a brass weight in one end. I'll grab one. Hang on, where's my box? Keep my batons in a box. You see.
Very nice.
I spun it very quickly there because there would have been a little bit of advertising, but let's not go into that.
That's all right. On this success stream, you can advertise.
Right. So
we've already plugged Starbucks about 8 times. So
oh, of course we have. I forgot about that. So this is the stick I use, and this is rosewood, and this is just, I don't know, just some kind of basic wood in the white. These are handmade in India, and they have. I'll call it the screen. You can see there's a little brass weight in the other end.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. So then it just literally will balance beautifully. Oh, hang on. Let's get that right. It'll balance beautifully.
Wow.
So I'm not holding now. So then when I pick it up, it just feels like it's kind of made of air. And there are so many things. As you can see, I kind of manipulate the thing, and I hold it like this, sometimes like this. Depends what I need to do. And as I said, everybody favors something different. But my description of myself is a Valley's boy with a stick.
That's great. One of the things I was really going to try and pick your brains on today, Simon, if I could, is that we have people listening to this from all around the world. We have people who run their own businesses. We have advisors in financial services. We have managers. We have leaders of industry. And one of the things that we often get asked, particularly when it comes to running a team, I mean, there's no better example of someone from the Valley's waving a stick, but you are pulling together, galvanizing, as you say, all these talented musicians. And I think you're being far too humble when you talk about their talent rather than your own, because clearly the leader of the orchestra, as it were, has to be pretty talented himself or herself to be able to make it all work. In terms of what makes you so successful, it's not just the ability to wave a stick in the various different directions that you wave it. There's something much more about bringing together a group of people and making them play. And I'm using this as a kind of a metaphor.
Yes, of course.
For kind of teams generally. bringing them all together and getting them to play the same tune in the same way. How does, do you have a philosophy? Is there a particular approach you adopt? How does it happen? Because, you know, there won't be, there'll be some people out there who'll be very fascinated to understand how it all works musically. But just as a general concept, how do you bring together so many people and get them kind of eating out the palm of your hand, as it were?
Well, what's interesting, I think always whenever, you must forgive me because I'm suffering a little bit hay fever, so it's my nose is itching terribly, and so are my eyes. But we'll soldier on. When we have two kinds of music that we work on. We have stuff that is new and almost still wet when we get it, and then we have stuff that's been around for centuries, which everybody knows. So let's pick something. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which everybody knows, it's the da 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 one, as everybody calls it. Everybody knows that symphony. So if you go to work with a symphony orchestra that's been together for any length of time, they will have done that piece countless times. So the notes are known, the phrases are known, the bars are known, and all of those things. So when you come to that, you are now in a situation where musicians will inspire each other. So somebody might do something that you haven't done before, and then you'll go. So let's say, you know, the cellos will do something fantastic, but then the second violins have that coming up. So you'll go, violins, can we just do what the cellos did there? That was brilliant. I'm going to take that and do that. So when I'm working on a piece that's known, I prepare enough so that I'm not stuck in my and set in my ways. So I will rekindle my love for a symphony, for example, before going to an orchestra, but I will never over prepare. I never come to a symphony with a fixed idea about things, because then I'm kind of trying to fit the wrong peg in the wrong hole as such. You've got to be able to take that inspiration from you. Now, when we're talking about new music, that's a different kind of thing, because we are now all on the same journey. They don't know how it goes. I don't know how it goes because nobody's ever heard it or ever seen it. I mean, modern technology helps us a little, because we have, when composers write these days, predominantly they are using some kind of package for writing their music rather than writing by hand as we used to. We're now having electronic versions, and there are, you know, at least 2 or 3 on the market that people use regularly. And you can get some kind of basic MP3s from these things. They're the kind of orchestral sounds that you would never want to hear in a month of Sundays in the concert hall, because they are, you know, they're electronic and dreadful. But they give you an idea of the shape and the scope of the piece. But a good musician should be able to look at that score and go, right, well, I can see what this is about now if I look at this this particular section. For me, the way I see music sometimes is a little bit like blocks of Lego. I can look at a flat page and suddenly there's a 3D element. It's almost like somebody puts a block of yellow or a block of blue or whatever it is. And I don't know whether, I've never explored this with my colleagues. Maybe I will. I'm going to be in Holland as of Sunday. A very good friend of mine is running his first conducting course, where he's going to be teaching and helping people navigate this wonderful world of orchestras. And so I think that this could be a great discussion about how we see things and how things come up. But so when it's modern music, we're on a voyage of discovery. And another thing that might surprise some is that the way I mark my scores, so sort of things that I write in, when I compare them to other conductor scores, they don't look even remotely similar. I don't write a great deal in my scores. I go from what I can see, what I can hear, and what's happening. Now, that's not to say that others won't do that, but some people want to write more and some people don't. And some people have maps. Some people map out phrasing and this kind of thing. And I don't know. It's an interesting thing because it's all so very nebulous. But getting back to the modern piece of music, that's when we're in some ways we're at our best as a unit, because then what we're doing is we're really relying on each other. So to make a kind of business correlation, if you like, if you're a CEO that gets far too involved in the specialists that you have working for you, instead of keeping the plates spinning or keeping the pans from boiling over, because that's what we are as conductors. The famous Dutch conductor Bernard Haitink lived till he was 95 and was conducting right up until his mid to late 90s. And he said famously that conducting is nothing more than moving air. I take air from here, I move it over there, I bring it up here, and I move it over there, and I keep moving it all the time. And I think that's a great way to see it. Also, Riccardo Muti, another wonderful, wonderful conductor, he said something along the lines that I have an idea in my head that I have to give to a musician who's got their own ideas in their head that they've got to bring and then meld with mine and give it me back in the way that I think I've given it to them, so that I can give it to them in the audience. And so it becomes alchemy after a while. Great book for those people out there who want to get under the skin of some of these things. There's a great book by Tom Service. Tom Service is a Radio 3 presenter, and it's music of that. I think it's Music of Alchemy. It's on my shelf. Where are you? Hang on, 2 seconds. Where are you? Just so we get it. Music as Alchemy, and it talks about a number of conductors. It takes some famous conductors, and he goes and he watches them and he observes them, and then he makes an assessment on that. And I think that these kind of books are to extend the thoughts that I'm giving you now, because I'm only one thought in thousands upon thousands of thoughts when it comes to musicians and conductors. So don't place all of your store by what I'm saying. Do your syntopic research when you look right and left and get all these different ideas and then come up with your own.
Simon, if I could, put it in this way, you talked about the new music still wet on the page, as it were, and the pieces that everybody knows. Let's talk about another piece that everybody knows, Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Let's compartmentalize your life into maybe 2 or 3, because I'm very, very interested to know what's next. So let's call that the winter months, although it seems like permanently winter at the moment. And let's talk about where you are now. We've talked a little bit about where you've come from. So maybe a little bit about what's been and what's yet to come, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I think I suppose that the thing to start with is that transition from being this from doing this for a living, because that's what I did for the first more than 25 years of my career. From the age of 19, I started playing professionally when I was 19. Came here. I'm currently residing just outside Birmingham. Came here to study, and within 6 weeks, somebody called me up and said, "Look, can you come and play for money?" So my career had already begun before I'd even finished studying. Now is in no way to brag. I just happened to be a name on a piece of paper that was given to somebody else, and then I'm away. And then once you start making those connections, then I've been pretty much working ever since. But my fiddle went down, I suppose, in 2011-12. My final big and grand gesture as a violinist was leading an orchestra for Alfie Boe, the British tenor. Wonderful, wonderful guy who I've been in touch with in the last couple of weeks. I went to see his show in Birmingham. There's a possibility that we may come together again in the not too distant future, and that would be a joy, because he's an absolute he's a powerhouse. He really is, and his voice was terrific when I heard him recently. There, better than I've ever heard it. And so I was leading for Alfie on a Saturday night in January 2012. Drove home on the Sunday, packed a suitcase, jumped on a plane to South Africa on Monday morning to start my international, quote, conducting career. So I was a violinist on the Saturday and a conductor by Monday morning. Now, I studied conducting as an undergraduate and have distinctions for doing that. But, it took a backseat to playing in my fiddle and being in the string quartet and doing those things. So so if you like, the spring of my career as a conductor began in 2012 when I jumped on this first world tour with Il Divo. I was Il Divo's conductor for 3 years. So wherever they went on the globe, pretty much everything they sang, I conducted for 3 years, and it was great but brutal. I mean, the schedule that those boys were on at the time was just unbelievable. I mean, in that first tour, we played 47. No, what did we do? We played 150 shows in 129 cities, 47 countries, 6 continents in 9 months. Wow. It was just barking mad. So a lot of the people who are listening into this today, we will have, I will have been to your wonderful countries, and there are some achingly beautiful and exciting places across the globe, and I would advise anybody, especially if you're a young person, because if I could have traveled when I was in my 20s, what more would I've learned? It was nice to do it in my 40s because I was I was a fully grown adult with teenage kids, but to have done it in my 20s, God, it could have been eye-opening. And who's to know what I would be doing now? Would I even be a musician? Who knows? But then, so that all led on, and so my career has progressed naturally from being a violinist, when I did all the things you're supposed to do as a violinist, plus I did a few more, into this conducting thing. And I've been very fortunate that transition has been so smooth. I was lucky that I found out that I could do certain things as a conductor. One of the things I specialized in, certainly for a long time, was working with tracks. So that's when you see, you'll see a pop star on TV. They turn and they have headphones in their ears, because they're being fed certain information about, you can't always hear the drums on a stage, for example, even though you're right there with this audience screaming. You need it we call these in-ear monitors, so you can have more of the drums, less of the drums, more guitar, more whatever. So I was used to working with a click track, as we do in the studio, to make sure everything lines up. So when a band might rehearse, or a soloist or something, the orchestra will rehearse separately. Films are one of those things, where we use a combination sometimes of click track and a screen where white light goes by, and then they're called punches and streamers, which is an interesting thing. Too detailed to get into. We'll have to talk about that another time. But I found that I could do that, so that also helped things go forwards. And then in 2015, the summer came, if you like, in that career, because I became the chief conductor of the State Chamber Orchestra in Slovakia. I was appointed in 2015. Having worked with the orchestra, they were our orchestra for Il Divo for all of Europe. And we got on so well that I fell in love with them, and they fell in love with me. And so for the next 3 years, I was their chief conductor. Also, during this time, I became a guest, as you said right at the very beginning, in St. Petersburg. And were it not for the current situation that we find ourselves in, I would still be there. I've been invited a number of times, and sadly, because of where we're at and my particular principles, I can't go and work there in the current climate. We lost some concerts because of the pandemic, as did the world and his wife when it came to musicians. So the summer came then, as I said, with the Slovaks, and now we've come through that. I'm still their principal guest conductor, I believe, yeah. So it's the UK more so is where it's been more recently. So during that time, I became the artistic director of my professional chamber orchestra here. It's only in this country that we seem to want to make a distinction between professionals and non-professionals. For me, it's just music. It doesn't matter whether I'm working with young people, with dedicated, card-carrying professional musicians, or whether they are hobbyists, because that's what they're called in Finland, in case anybody's interested in that. I love that word, hobbyists. If you fish on the weekend, or you drive a rally car, or you play football, you are a hobbyist. You are not an amateur. You do it because you love it. And the word amateur has been hijacked, especially in this country, by people as a put down, and at its intrinsic meaning, it's a French word that means for the love of.
Yeah.
And so so we should all love it. So that developed here, and then within the last year, I've been appointed as the music director of the Hull Philharmonic Orchestra, which is one of our oldest non-professional orchestras, started more than 140 years ago. I'm only its 7th music director in that time. Wow. And one of those music directors was none other than Henry J. Wood. Henry Wood was the man who started the proms back, well, certainly the proms in this country. Promenading as a concept began in France in the, I think, if I remember rightly, 1850s, 1860s. But he took this mantle on completely, and then through his connections, eventually with the BBC, which came in about 1927, 1928, when the proms came under the banner of the BBC. BBC started, 1922, 23 on the radio, I think. And for a long time, many of our great conductors and musicians resisted having anything to do with it, because they felt that it meant that audiences would not come to concerts. They would just sit at home and listen to their radiograms and the boxes where the concerts came out. but eventually they realized that they should embrace it, and so they did. So I share this role with one of our greatest conductors and one of our greatest musical impresarios, and I'm more than humbled to do so. I'm reading a book about him at the moment, and I've also found out that the contract and the deal I have with the orchestra is exactly the same as the deal he had more than nearly 100 years ago. He took the orchestra on in 1923 and was the music director till 1938-39 season.
Wow.
And as I said, our deal and how we go about what we do with the orchestra, there's an assistant musical director who does the rehearsals during the weeks leading up to the concert, and then I arrive in concert week, and then I'm handed an orchestra that's already prepared. So that's new for me, because I'm used to preparing everything from scratch.
That's incredible. You are, you are one of the few guests I've ever had on the live stream, or indeed on any of my podcasts, Simon, that is both talented and generous in equal measure. I guess a final word around philanthropy. We'll go back to where we started. What, do you have any particular beliefs around, what makes you such a kind and generous? I mean, it's very obvious to anyone listening today what a clearly kind and generous man you are. You have a very you're very humble, but I think you recognize that you take a lot from life, and rightly so, because of your musical talent, but also you do seek to give back. And I think possibly one of the reasons why you enjoy what you do so much is because you give so much back. Just a final word on what makes you the philanthropist you are. And again, to be very clear on what we mean by this, we're not talking about somebody who gives away vast sums of money. We're talking about someone who tries to make the world a better place. Any final comments to those listening around the act of giving and just being kind, I guess?
That's a really big question, I think, and it's something that I guess I try not to think about in a way. I think basically we have this situation where we are given a belief system by our parents and our peers when we're kids, or a value system, call it whichever one you like, and we spend the most of our lives then trying to fit everything into that system. And when it doesn't fit, it's either not good, we hate it, all those strong words for things that push things out. And if we can't make it fit, then it's useless. And that's not true. What we should do is try and not, our core beliefs are very, very, very simple. If there was one word that I could stick to, fairness would be it. We're always in a situation where society we hope it will progress, but invariably it doesn't. There's a little book that I read every day. It was written in 1647 by a wonderful Catholic priest called Balthazar Gracian. It's not a religious book, because that's not me. Don't let the little cross fool you, by the way. That's just to protect my violins. This guy, the advice given in this book is so pertinent for today, and he was sought out by kings and princes and dukes for his wisdom. I've gone a little further back even than that. One of the other books that I regularly come back to are the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. 167 to 171, never meant to be published. First came to light in 1560 something, 63, I want to say 65. When somebody found a copy and then published it, and you read that and you think, well, crikey, nothing has changed. The philosophy of where we are from way back, Socrates and Stoics and beyond, and right the way up to our modern philosophers, Malcolm Gladwell and Eckhart Tolle, these kind of guys who talk about this power of now and these things. But fairness really is what it's about. And if you can't be fair to another human being, then you're I think you're in a very sad place. That's not to say that the way I go about things is the right way or the wrong way. It's just the right way for me, and it makes me feel better about life. It keeps my heart rate and my blood pressure down a little, even though I do take some kind of pills to help me, certainly with the blood pressure. Suspicion is my blood pressure has always been quite high, and I'm either, as I am now, completely alive and alert, or I'm sleeping. And there doesn't seem to be much in between. I don't veg very well. I don't sit very well. I'm struggling to get through a film, to be honest. But I think it's incumbent upon us to try and find, if you, what is it that somebody said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Mm.
And I think when it comes down to what I do, that maybe can reflect on others, it's about making a connection with people as individuals. You know, there are far too many people who have opinions about what other people do rather than trying to understand what people do, if that's the right way to go about it. You know, we have an opinion about how this person runs this company, or does this, or does that, or does the other. We don't try and understand. And I think if we try to understand a little more, and I think as musicians we are very good at that. We appreciate very much that there are certain instruments at certain times that are really hard to play, and other times it's a little easier.
Mm.
But it's very hard to do your work under such scrutiny all the time. And musicians, we are in some ways we are taught not to step away from that, and we should. We must enjoy what we do, because within the word enjoy is the word joy, and sometimes the joy is lost in our work. And I'm rambling a little here, but a very good friend of mine, who's a promoter, said to me when I was working with him with a particular artist. He said, Simon, if you find a job that you love, you'll never do another day's work in your life. And I found that. I found the job that I love. And if it was all to stop today, I can be very thankful and very happy with the work that I've been given, not the work that I've done, but the opportunities and the work that I've been given, because it's, you know, and I genuinely mean this. It's a privilege always to stand in front of any group as somebody who leads them. And I think as one Jeffrey Archer said, first among equals is the thing. And we stand in front of these people because they give us the authority with which to stand in front of them, to be the bus driver, to be the person with the keys, to be the person who has to, you know, operate the steering wheel. I always come back to that one because my father was a bus driver. That's always my, you know, I'm the only person who can drive this thing. And that's what I feel is most important. It's about that connection with people, and sometimes that gets borne out. You'll have seen from my well, maybe it isn't on that stuff. I won a competition in 2022 in Romania, and there was no jury. Normally in conducting competitions, people of my age don't get to do those, but this was an open competition. I wasn't in the original 64 that were going to make the final. I was a reserve. I get to go to the final as a reserve with about 2 weeks' notice, and I go thinking, well, let's just enjoy the time. But the jury, as I said, there was no jury. The jury was the orchestra, all 70 members of the orchestra, who got to choose, and it was one of the strangest experiences, because not only do I make the final, which I was most surprised at, but when we finished, everybody puts their instruments down and picks up a mobile phone because they have an app on which to vote. You never see a mobile phone on a stage of a concert hall anywhere, and because people just, you know, you're not allowed to bring them for a start off, and you'd have the worry of the damn thing going off, especially if you're in a live broadcast or anything. And this was all live and streamed, and they chose me as their winner, and I was hugely humbled by that experience. Also, the audience and the online audience all were in agreement. And I think it's communication. You've got to you know, you've got to engage with the people opposite you. And the one thing I would leave people with who don't work in my profession, in your offices or in your groups, maybe you've told people this countless times, Sandro, but if you want to know what's happening with your people, sit down and actually talk to them about life and about the other stuff, not about the work that you do. And if you want to talk to somebody, go in the morning with a handful of chocolate bars, put them down on the desk and keep walking to the person you want to talk to. Just put the chocolate bar on the desk. Don't say anything, just keep walking. And I guarantee you, if you're in the corner office, they'll come knock on your door and say, what was that for? Come in, let's have a chat. Yeah. Chocolate bars for you. Just as a gift. Let's, you know, how are things going? How where are we at? Because a manager or a leader, you have to, there's that great graphic, isn't there? A piece of paper where it says, this is what a leader does, this is what a boss does. For me, there is no such thing as a boss. You make a person a boss or not. And anybody who says that they're the boss, I have no truck with that. If you're going to lead people, then you have to take into consideration what it is you're leading and how best to do that within the knowledge that the person who's talented in front of you is giving you their talent to play with. And that's what I get. They give me their talent to play with. And I have to treat that with the utmost respect.
Well, your recognition, that talent that was rightly recognized in 2022 by your peers, you described as humbling. It has been really humbling once again to talk to you today. It goes without saying that on behalf of everyone listening from all around the world, I hope you continue to move air around with your stick for many, many years to come. Simon, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being one of life's really great people that really does change the lives of so many around you, including mine. I am off to Chicago in a number of weeks' time, and one of the things that I am doing already, I have prepared, is some Starbucks gift cards, because my board of directors, I'm upcoming president of a large foundation called the MDRT Foundation based in Chicago. And one of my jobs is to give all of my board a gift card, a Starbucks gift card, asking them to pay the kindness forward within 24 hours. So it's amazing how that little pebble that was thrown into the water 8 years ago is already spreading far and wide. So thank you for what you've brought to me and so many that I've shared that thought and idea with. Wish you all the best in all you do and look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Well, the pleasure has been entirely mine. Thank you very much.